I think this will kind of be my final video on the Skytap. I do have a few concerns with its quality. For example, if you look right here, we have a top bar going across right there and a bottom bar going across right here. They should be level. I don't know if you can really see, but they're quite a bit off. Same here. This bar here should be the same angle as that bar. If you look down here, I mean, these are way off. If you look at this bar right here, I mean, the entire bar is tilted. And then we've got some defects in here, which I don't think are good. Where, if you look, these are a lot better. They're a lot more straight. But every little bar is just a little bit off. It's also interesting. If you come look right here, and look at how this bar and this bar are in relation to each other, this bar and this bar, you'll notice that this bar is off to this side and this bar is off to this side. So the two top center cage piece bars are off to the right side. If we look on this one, this bar compared to this bar, it's pretty far over to the left. This bar and this bar, this is also farther to the left than on this side. So you can see it's an inconsistency there. Same here. If we look, you can see that this bar and this bar, if we compare these distances, this bar, like the top of this, is about level with the top of this bar, where the bottom of this bar is significantly lower than the bottom of this bar. So these two are shifted downwards. Another inconsistency. We haven't measured how far off these are from each other, but I'm imagining that these are all off. Let's see, if we come look here, this bar is pretty far over here. This side is about level with here. Come over here, this one's actually pretty close to the same, but to me it looks like the bar is twisted just a little bit this way. Yeah. See, if we come over here, can we also see it? Yeah, you can see it pretty bad here. You can see that about the center line of this bar lines up with the bottom of this bar. Here we can see the bottom of this bar lines up about with the top of this bar. So it's just a whole bunch of inconsistencies. It just almost makes it look like it was made in someone's garage. I personally don't like how they wrapped this around the powder coating. Over time, I'm afraid it could scratch the powder coating. It just might not last as long, but I don't really know. It might be just fine. As for the stitching, I'm not too concerned about the strength. But if you look, we just have lots of fraying lines everywhere. It just doesn't look great. If you look up top, the stitchings are all in different places. They're not evenly spaced out. It just doesn't look super nice and professional. If we come over here again, as I pointed out in a previous video, they were welding along here and just missed welding an entire section, which, I mean, that's not quite right. They probably shouldn't do that. In a lot of these welds here, we have little holes, which for the short term, probably won't affect too much. But long term, they could cause cracking. Additionally, this was welded with a much cheaper MIG process, where with the flat top we have it all TIG welded, so it just doesn't look quite as nice. Not sure if we have good lighting, but it's just not super consistent. We're interested in having the welds professionally x-ray tested, because this is powder coating. It's kind of hard to see how bad the welds really are. I mean, there's a chance they could be, the welds we have could be just fine. But there's also a very real possibility that they could have terrible penetration, they could have micro cracking, it could be straight up dangerous. We don't really know at this point. But long term, I don't feel like the welds are going to last quite as long. Yeah, they've got a whole bunch of little holes here, which sometimes you put holes in your metal pieces to vent as you're welding them. But that gives an opportunity for moisture to get in there and start to corrode the aluminum, which aluminum doesn't corrode nearly as badly as steel. But yeah, you don't want moisture building up inside your frame. So if you can avoid those holes, it's really good. We were having a lot of problems fueling this up. You've got a very narrow space here, so to try and get your fuel can in to this tank, and then it's impossible to tilt your fuel can high enough. So if you do get a Skytap, you'll need a much longer fuel nozzle. It's just very difficult to fuel up, and we're still wondering about how well fueling up would work when the engine's warm and you've got this exhaust that's really hot right next to your fuel tank and fuel lines that you're trying to put over into this tank. You probably can't see it right in here, but we found that inside this steel rod that helps hold the fuel tank, it was rusting. And this is a brand new frame. It's not too big of a deal, but it's not the greatest. You can see right here in the powder coating, we've got lots of little bubbles. I mean, once again, it's not a huge issue, but it's just not screaming quality. Yeah, as for the engine, the Videography runs great. We mounted our own Videography to it. Oh, another thing. We don't know exactly how Andrew does this, but we mounted up the fuel line the same way we do on the flat top, and it put this fuel bulb right next to and behind this exhaust. So trying to prime it if the engine's warm at all could be very difficult, and trying to get your hands in here, it's just not very comfortable. We're on a flat top. It's just a lot better placing. You can also see we've got a ton of room here, and it's a lot easier to fuel up a flat top. You can use, any regular fuel tank, and then you can also tilt upwards that fuel tank to be able to get fuel in. Once again, it's not a huge issue on the Skytap. It's just kind of another little annoying thing. On the Skytap, these these knots, they came this way, and we already have a bunch of the knots coming loose. So not all of the nets are the same, not all of the netting is the same tightness anymore. So this one's pretty tight and pretty good. This one's a bit looser. This one's really loose, because this knot is coming out, and this one's pretty good and pretty tight. It's kind of harder to see where we have an engine on it now, but if you come to the side, you can see that the back side of this cage piece is warped. Same here, it's warped. It warps backwards and then back forwards, but it's a different warp between all of the cage pieces. and it kind of looks like all the cage pieces have just a little bit of a warp to them. And I personally just don't really like that. If you look, you can kind of see that the rear hoop is slightly farther outwards than the front hoop. This isn't a huge issue, but when they were bending these metal pieces, they didn't make it consistent. So typically, it's more level here and a little bit farther out as it comes up here and more level here. It's really pronounced and bad on this one cage piece that we have, where the farther back hoop comes way outwards. This one cage piece especially is quite defective, just in its machining and how it was designed. When we got the Skytap, we noticed the packaging wasn't very good. We got a couple scrapes that came with the Skytap that, we did not put in. It either came before or during shipping. We've got these lines that stick way out. And you can notice that, that's coming pretty close to the prop. We have rubber motor mounts which help absorb vibration, but as stuff moves, there's a chance this netting could hit that propeller. Chances are slim, but it's a possibility. You can see that all the ends of the netting are fraying, so they didn't at least finish it with a lighter, which, in my opinion, you should. If you look here on a flat top, all the ends of the netting we cut pretty short. We glue it all down, unlike the Skytap. I don't believe they glue it down on the Skytap. It didn't feel like it. And then we use a lighter to finish all the edges so it's not going to be fraying on you. And what else? I'm curious as to what he does with these rivets. To me, they look quite a bit different than the flat top rivets. If you look, the flat top rivets seem to be they just seem to be better machined, a bit higher quality. But once again, I don't really know. These seem to be, stamped out of a flat piece of aluminum or something. But I don't really know on that one. As for the plastic connectors, all 3 launches we've done so far with the Skytap, we had the lines get caught on here every time they came off, but they did get caught every single one of our 3 launches, where we never have that with a flat top. You can see on the flat top, everything's perfectly smooth. The Velcros are all positioned so they can't get caught. Where on the Skytap, they can get caught, and they have temporarily gotten caught. Luckily for us, every time it came out, but it is a potential issue that you could get it caught a bit worse. As for the harness, we didn't notice a major increase in comfort. I did notice when I was wearing it that it doesn't flex as much around here, so it doesn't bend quite as much to your shoulder. This is pretty thick right here, and it was actually creating a pressure point on the inside of my shoulder, which I thought was kind of interesting, where this was able to bend around my neck and shoulder and create a more even pressure. But overall, it honestly felt pretty close to the flat top on the ground. We did notice that with these straps a lot farther back, the flat top they're a bit farther forward, and our seat board's a lot longer, which makes them a lot farther forward than they look. But we noticed with the Skytap, these straps being farther back, they were pinching your groin area a bit more. Maybe we were just adjusting it wrong. But I mean, we're very used to adjusting flat tops, so I don't think that was it. We also noticed that in flight, this strap, it's sewn kind of weird into here, and it was creating a pressure point on your leg right in here on both sides. Plus, this is a lot more narrow, so it's squishing you in, even for, some of us skinnier guys. So we didn't like that quite as much. We noticed that a lot of these straps and buckles, they didn't move nearly as freely as they do on the flat top. We spend a lot of money to get really high-end straps and buckles. Yeah, we really spend a lot of time and money to get the flat top as good as it is. We're continually working on new developments. So I mean, overall, it's an okay paramotor frame, but we also found that the seat board was a lot farther back. So even for, a 6-foot-tall pilot, our legs were hanging way off the end. And then it was creating a pressure point right in here also. So we found, especially in flight, it wasn't quite as comfortable as the flat top. We didn't notice this pushing up on your shoulders as much as we expected during weight shift. That wasn't actually terrible, but it was putting pressure on the shoulders, but it wasn't the neck, but it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable. Andrew claims that this comes out of weight shift easier, which is true, but in return, we found that it was a lot harder to get into weight shift, and it took a lot more effort to weight shift. Where on the flat top, it goes into a weight shift easy, and it comes out of a weight shift really easy, but it's not quite, it doesn't pull you out of the weight shift like the Skytap will. But in turn, it's a lot easier, we found, to weight shift on the flat top. As for comfort bar strength, you may have seen another video posted by Flat Top Paramotors where we were bending this. These support bars here are a lot shorter than on the flat top, and are not quite as strong. We found that because of that, we can bend these bars a lot farther. And during one of our bend tests, by hand, we accidentally bent it in so far that it stayed, and we actually had to bend it back out by hand to get it straight again. Which, for me, I don't know, that's just kind of a concern for me. If you can bend these comfort bars inwards and outwards by hand, and like permanently bend it just on accident, that's kind of a concern for me. Sadly, Trevor edited that out of our previous video. It was pretty funny. I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's not terrible, but we found it was pretty uncomfortable in flight, especially compared to a flat top. On the ground, it was fairly comparable, but it did sit lower on our backs than the flat top did, even if we had the straps way tighter than we ever would on the flat top. And because of that, it was sitting a lot lower. Even though the comfort bars are higher up in relation to you, we found that they were sitting even lower. And it just made the ground control a lot harder for us. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting unit. I'm really interested to hear Andrew's response, because I don't know how you can ship a brand new product like this that's this far off and just claim that we're making a bullcrap. This is not screaming quality. Another interesting point we found, the engine is a lot lower than the the hang point. On the flat top, we put it really close to perfectly level. Andrew claims that on the flat top, it will tilt down a little bit when you punch the throttle, which you feel just a tiny bit of that, but it's barely noticeable. On the Skytap, we found when you punch the throttle, it tilts way back. And if you accidentally apply throttle in the wrong way, it can really mess stuff up. Anyways, that's kind of my thoughts.